The Queen Consort was hours away from a press appearance. Her outfit was chosen, sealed behind a private wardrobe no one was meant to touch. But the moment a royal guard spotted the markings on the garment bag, he knew exactly what it might be. Queen Elizabeth's coronation robe. Not a replica, not a tribute. The real one. And when Camilla refused to open the wardrobe, he didn't ask again, he forced them open himself. What he pulled out shocked everyone. Now, before we show you exactly what unfolded inside Clarence House, hit subscribe with the bell turned on and drop a comment telling us what you would have done in that moment. Because this story didn't end in the spotlight. It ended behind a locked wardrobe. The chandeliers inside Clarence House had already been dimmed for the evening when Elsie Grafton realised she'd forgotten something. She was nearly finished with the wardrobe check, cross-referencing tomorrow's outfit choices against what the press team had requested. Something visually commanding, they'd said. Something with gravitas for the step and repeat photos. Camilla wanted to look heritage-focused, connected to tradition. Elsie had been working as a junior chamber attendant for 3 years, and she knew the routine by heart. Sapphire silk daywear, check. State brocade shawl, check. Beige gloves for the garden greeting, check. Everything was accounted for, properly tagged, ready for tomorrow's appearance. That's when she dropped her pen. It rolled behind the dressing screen, of course, the one spot she couldn't reach without getting on her hands and knees. She crouched down, feeling around in the dim space between the wall and an old campaign trunk, when her fingers brushed against something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. A garment bag. Large, heavy, and older than anything else in that immaculate dressing room. She should have left it alone. She knew that, but dust was clinging to the deep velvet covering, and there was something about the way it had been wedged back there, not stored, but hidden, that made her stomach tighten. The emblem on the bag made her breath catch completely. A crown encircled by laurel, and beneath it, E-R-I-I, embroidered in faded gold thread. Elizabeth Regina II. Her hands were trembling slightly as she unzipped it just a few inches. Just enough to see the cascade of crimson velvet inside, heavy as a theatre curtain, with gold-threaded oak leaves catching what little light filtered through the gap. She'd only ever seen fabric like this in coronation photos, the kind that lived in museums and history books, not in private wardrobes, not marked for press appearances. Elsie carefully zipped it back up and moved it out from behind the screen, not stuffing it back where she'd found it, but placing it gently on the ottoman where someone would notice it in the morning. Then she stepped into the corridor and made a phone call she probably wasn't supposed to make. Royal Collection. This is Elsie Grafton at Clarence House. I need to report something. There's a garment here with E-R-I-I markings, crimson velvet, gold embroidery, and it's scheduled to be worn tomorrow. She didn't need to say more. 20 minutes later, an encrypted alert was pinging on a secure console deep inside Windsor Castle. By sunrise, that alert had reached Princess Anne's personal aide. And a sealed envelope was being hand-delivered to Wellington Barracks, addressed to Sergeant Ian Merrick, with a message that would change everything. Possible unauthorised possession of state regalia scheduled for public wear. Clarence House. Immediate verification required. Because what Elsie had found wasn't just any ceremonial garment. It was Queen Elizabeth II's actual coronation robe, the same one worn at Westminster Abbey in 1953, and someone was planning to wear it again. Sergeant Ian Merrick had learned not to trust knocks that came before dawn. This one arrived at 4:52, just as his kettle was starting to whistle in the corner of his Wellington Barracks quarters. Not the hurried rap of a courier running late. Not the casual rhythm of a friend stopping by. This was official, measured. The kind of knock that meant someone with real authority was standing outside your door. He opened it to find a staffer from the Royal Liaison Office, face completely neutral, holding a crimson-sealed envelope like it contained nuclear codes. No small talk, no explanation, just a nod, a handoff, and footsteps disappearing down the corridor. The envelope bore a single line stamped in black ink. Immediate eyes only. Heritage Detail Clearance, CH. Merrick had been doing heritage security for 8 years. He'd handled missing artwork, suspicious auction lots, items that had wandered from royal residences into private collections. But he'd never received anything with this level of urgency, not at this hour. Inside were 2 sheets. The first was typed and clinical. Confirmed sighting of regalia class ceremonial garment bearing ERII. Insignia within Clarence House dressing quarters, 2240 hours. Associated with Queen Elizabeth II's coronation wardrobe archive. Item is not recorded as transferred, loaned or deaccessioned. Scheduled for potential public wear within 12 hours. The second was handwritten. Just a few lines, but they carried the weight of a royal command. Sergeant Merrick, the robe was never meant to be worn again. Certainly not rebranded. Confirm it. Secure it. A. He didn't need to see a signature to know Princess Anne had written those words herself. Anne didn't involve herself in minor protocol disputes. If she was sending handwritten notes before sunrise, this wasn't about fashion choices or press appearances. This was about protecting something that belonged to history itself. Merrick folded the note and tucked it into his breast pocket, then moved with the kind of precision that 8 years of military service had drilled into him. Within minutes, he was dressed in the understated grey uniform of the Internal Security Liaison Corps. Not the ceremonial red that would draw attention, but the kind of outfit that let you blend into royal household without anyone asking questions. He pulled a narrow archival transport case from his footlocker and checked its contents. Temperature-controlled, acid-free lining, biometric lock. Everything needed to safely relocate a piece of national heritage. By 6:10, he was in the back of an unmarked Defender, navigating London's early morning traffic toward Clarence House. As far as the staff there would know, he was just another contractor handling pre-event logistics. What they wouldn't know, at least not yet, was that he wasn't there to inspect security protocols. He was there to prevent a theft. The gates of Clarence House opened without drama, just like they always did. Merrick stepped from the Defender with his archival case, flashing the kind of laminated ID that had no impressive titles or official seals, just clearance codes that opened doors without triggering conversations. The morning doorman barely glanced up. To him, Merrick was just another liaison from Palace Support Services, here for routine pre-event prep. Inside, the house was already humming with activity. Florists arranging stems in the drawing room, press aides carrying equipment between wings. The familiar choreography of a royal appearance coming together. Camilla had a midday event at St. James's Palace, and every detail had to be camera perfect. Merrick walked through it all like he belonged there. That was the key to heritage security work. Moving through royal residences with the quiet confidence of someone whose presence had already been approved by 5 different departments. Don't hurry. Don't glance around nervously. Just walk like you've done this 100 times before. A valet held the door to the south wing dressing corridor. "That the steamer crate?" he asked, nodding toward Merrick's slim case. "Yes," Merrick replied, offering nothing more. The valet gestured down the hall. "Lady Ashcroft's doing final selections in the suite. Be quick, they're dressing the presentation mannequins soon." Merrick nodded once and continued down the corridor, his case gripped loosely but securely. The carpet grew thicker as he walked deeper into Camilla's private wing. Overhead sconces cast warm light against vintage wallpaper. Portrait of Queen Victoria and Princess Mary watched him pass, their painted eyes seeming to follow his progress. Outside the dressing suite, he could see a valet arranging garments on a portable steaming rack, smoothing hems and checking for imperfections. Among them hung a long mannequin frame with an empty hanger waiting across its shoulders. A paper tag read, "Main presentation look, heritage focused, / regal symbolism." Merrick's jaw tightened. They were expecting something grand, all right. He knocked once on the dressing room door and stepped inside without waiting for permission. The suite smelled of cedar and lavender. Half-packed leather suitcases lined the chaise lounge. A massive cherrywood wardrobe dominated the far wall, custom-built, hand-fitted, the kind of installation that cost more than most people's annual salaries. This wasn't just about protecting a piece of fabric, Merrick realized as he took it all in. This was about preventing a performance, because somewhere in that room, behind those polished doors and designer silks, sat the crown's most sacred garment. And in less than 3 hours, someone was planning to put it on. The moment Merrick fully entered the dressing suite, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. A woman in her 50s looked up from a folding table covered with accessories, silver blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon, charcoal blazer, clipboard in one hand like a weapon. Her eyes narrowed the instant she saw him. "You're not wardrobe staff," she said flatly. "No, ma'am. I'm here understanding protocol from the Royal Collection and Heritage Security." He set down his case carefully. "I need access to that wardrobe." The woman, Lady Ashcroft, according to the valet's earlier comment, tightened her grip on her tape measure. "On what basis?" Before he could answer, another voice cut through the suite like a blade through silk. "I assume you have a warrant. Or have we abandoned every principle of privacy this family supposedly upholds?" Camilla had entered silently, dressed in a quilted morning robe, coffee mug in hand, no pressed smile, no diplomatic pleasantries, just sharp eyes and a voice that could freeze water. Merrick inclined his head. "Ma'am." She walked past him without pause and set her mug down beside a velvet hat box. "Is there a bomb threat inside my closet, Sergeant? Or have you mistaken velvet for sedition?" There wasn't an ounce of amusement in her tone. "Under the 1998 Heritage Protection Act, Article 4, subsection B," Merrick replied even, "any item displaying sovereign regalia markings may be verified on site if suspected to have been removed from restricted custody without authorization." Camilla waved a hand toward the wardrobe. "Everything in there is for a scheduled public appearance. Are you suggesting I've stolen my own clothes?" "I'm not suggesting anything specific. But if the item in question is what we believe it is, it doesn't belong in private rotation." That's when her legal attaché materialized, 40s, impeccably dressed, voice already loaded with challenge. "Sergeant, this is not how protocols are followed. If you had concerns, you should have issued a request through Household Security and the Queen's personal office." "Which I did," Merrick said calmly. "This inspection is sanctioned and time-sensitive." "Time-sensitive?" Camilla's eyebrow arched. "Because I have a press appearance in 3 hours." "Is that the emergency? That someone might see a little history on camera?" Merrick looked directly at her. "Because what's behind this door was never meant for cameras, or commentary, or reinterpretation." The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut. Camilla crossed her arms, studying him with the quiet fury of someone used to getting her way through tone alone. "Do you have any idea what doors you're opening by doing this?" "Yes, ma'am," Merrick said, turning toward the wardrobe handles. "Then I'll open this one next." The hinges gave a soft groan as Merrick pulled the wardrobe doors wide. For a moment, nobody moved. Inside, everything was pristine. Rows of designer day dresses arranged by colour, crested brooches nestled in velvet trays, ceremonial gloves folded into silk pouches. It was the kind of organisation that radiated control and attention to detail. But Merrick wasn't looking at the perfection. He was scanning for the anomaly. Behind him, the legal attaché muttered, "This is an abuse of access. I'll be filing a complaint with the royal household." "You're welcome to," Merrick replied without turning around, "after I finish what I came to do." He found it on the lower shelf, tucked beneath a row of preserved formal wear. A single garment bag, longer than the others, heavier in the middle, its fabric cover visibly older and more weathered than everything else around it. Unlike the other bags, which bore printed wardrobe tags with dates and occasions, this one had no identification at all. Except for 3 letters embroidered into its upper hem, barely visible beneath years of careful dust. E-R-I-I. Elizabeth Regina, the second. Merrick's hands were steady as he unzipped the cover with deliberate precision. A faint scent of old cedar escaped, the kind of archival-grade preservation that museums used for their most precious artifacts. Then the robe emerged. Crimson velvet, thick as a tapestry, folded around an inner lining of gold silk that seemed to glow under the ceiling lights. The trim was breathtaking, gold-threaded oak leaves embroidered in full relief along the hem, each one individually stitched with bullion thread. Royal arms woven subtly into the fabric, not stamped or printed, but crafted by hand with the kind of skill that didn't exist anymore. And just beneath the collar, an aged linen tag in perfect calligraphy, N. Hartnell, May 1953. Windsor Atelier. There was no mistaking what he was looking at. This wasn't a tribute piece. It wasn't ceremonial inspired. It wasn't a replica commissioned for special occasions. This was the actual coronation robe, the one Queen Elizabeth II wore when she processed into Westminster Abbey 70 years ago. The one that had been sealed in temperature-controlled archival storage ever since, under sovereign custody, never meant to see daylight again. Until now. Merrick didn't need to announce his discovery. The silence in the room said everything. Behind him, Lady Ashcroft's clipboard had slipped from her fingers. The legal attaché's mouth had opened as if to object, but no words came. Camilla was the first to break the spell. She stepped forward, stopping just short of the garment, and took a slow, measured breath. It was intended as a symbol, she said evenly, a statement of harmony, a connection from one reign to another. Merrick kept his eyes on the robe, its crimson surface seeming to pulse under the lights. Symbolism, he said quietly, is no substitute for sovereignty. He reached for his tablet and scanned the inventory code, etched almost invisibly into the inner seam. The response was immediate. Royal Collection, Restricted Item, Class 1. He tapped Hold Initiated. The screen locked. The chain of custody had officially begun. And in that moment, history had just been saved from becoming a costume. Merrick spread an archival sheet across the chaise lounge and carefully lifted the coronation robe from its bag, handling it with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. The weight was staggering, not just physically, though the thick velvet and double silk lining made it surprisingly heavy. This robe carried the weight of memory, of photographs seen by billions, of a moment when a young woman became a queen and a nation held its breath. The gold oak leaf embroidery was still perfect after 70 years, each branch and stem catching the morning light like captured sunlight. The insignia, 3 lions for England, the lion rampant for Scotland, the harp for Ireland, shimmered beneath layers of protective silk that had kept them pristine for decades. Merrick turned over the collar to examine the construction tag, faded but completely legible. Hartnell, Coronation Commission, 1953, Royal Number 004. Behind him, Lady Ashcroft whispered, "Dear God, that's the real one." Camilla didn't flinch. She moved closer, hands clasped in front of her, voice remaining calm and controlled. "I didn't intend to parade it around London. It wasn't going to leave the building. Only be photographed, worn briefly to signal continuity between reigns." That was the word they used, continuity. Merrick continued his documentation without looking up. Continuity doesn't require inheritance. So history must stay locked in vaults forever, hidden away until everyone forgets it existed. "This isn't just history," Merrick replied, his voice quiet but firm. "It's legacy. And legacy doesn't get borrowed for photo opportunities." For the first time since entering the room, Camilla seemed genuinely unsettled. She turned away, pacing slowly around the suite's perimeter. "I was told it would resonate with the public, that they would welcome it. Tradition, comfort, the sense that this family endures despite everything. And frankly, I agreed. The robe is beautiful, powerful. It sends a message." Merrick looked up from his tablet. "It also sends a message that what belonged to the Queen now belongs to someone else." Their eyes met across the crimson fabric. "I suppose," she said after a long pause, "you've decided I'm not entitled to that." Merrick turned back to his work, logging the serial number into the encrypted heritage verification system. The response flashed green. Restricted heritage item. Class 1. Custodial authority. Royal Vault. Windsor. Export/display. Status prohibited. Hold confirmed. Custody initiated. He set the tablet down gently beside the robe. "This decision wasn't mine to make, ma'am," he said. "It was made 70 years ago. I'm just here to enforce it." The robe lay between them, bright and still and absolutely irreplaceable. Camilla said nothing more. She simply stood there, expression unreadable, and watched as Sergeant Merrick pulled on white archival gloves. Because the next person to touch that robe wouldn't be wearing it to cameras. They'd be returning it to where it belonged. The knock on the dressing suite door came exactly 23 minutes later. Not the hurried rap of a staffer or the polite tap of a valet. 3 deliberate strikes, evenly spaced, followed by the kind of silence that meant someone with real authority was waiting outside. Camilla turned toward the sound first, though something in her expression suggested she'd been expecting this moment. The door opened without ceremony. Princess Anne stepped inside, wearing a tailored navy coat and carrying no entourage, no cameras, no announcement of arrival. Just a slim, red folder tucked beneath her arm, like evidence waiting to be presented. She surveyed the scene, the open wardrobe, the coronation robe spread across the chaise, Merrick standing beside it like a guardian. Her eyes lingered on the gold embroidery for only a moment, before she walked directly to the centre of the room. "Sergeant," she said quietly. Merrick came to attention. "Ma'am." Anne placed the folder on the side table, opened it with precise movements, and withdrew a single laminated page that had clearly seen decades of careful preservation. She held it where everyone could see and read in a clear, steady voice. "Coronation robe, state velvet, designated item number 004. To remain in royal archives post-ceremony, not to be displayed, not to be worn, not to leave sovereign custody. Signed, E.R." Her mother's signature followed, firm, unmistakable, written in the same hand that had signed treaties and official documents for over 70 years. Anne looked directly at Camilla. Was this requested through the royal collection? Camilla's answer came carefully measured. It was recommended. By advisors who felt it would create the right impression. Recommended by whom, specifically? Silence. Anne didn't wait for clarification. "This wasn't a styling decision," she continued. "It was a breach of trust. Quiet, perhaps, but absolutely deliberate." Camilla's voice remained steady, controlled. No cameras had captured it. It never left this building. It was part of a larger conversation about renewal, about honouring what came before while moving forward. Anne's expression didn't soften. You honour what came before by leaving it intact, not by repurposing it. She stepped beside the robe and placed the yellowed inventory page next to it, 2 pieces of history, 70 years apart, telling the same story. This robe was worn once, by one person, on one day. That changed everything. That was its purpose. That was its moment. And that, she said, looking directly at Camilla, was enough. Camilla seemed to be weighing her response, studying Anne as if calculating the cost of pushing back. You can't deny that it would have created something meaningful. The public adores connections to the past, the same fabrics, the same symbols. It's reassuring during uncertain times. Anne moved closer to the robe, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. It's not reassuring. It's revision. You cannot wear someone else's crowning moment. She turned to Merrick. "Pack it. Immediately. I want it at Windsor before noon." Merrick nodded and reached for his transport case. The legal attaché started forward, but Anne cut him off without raising her voice. If this robe had crossed that threshold this morning under cameras, without authorization, it would have triggered a formal audit of the entire royal collection, starting with every wardrobe in every royal residence, beginning with this one. The man went completely still. Anne faced Camilla one final time, her words carrying the weight of absolute finality. "You may wear whatever befits your title and your role, but you will not wear what defined hers." Then she collected her folder, turned toward the door, and paused only once to nod at Merrick. "Secure transport. No stops. Direct to the vault." And with that, she was gone. No royal fanfare, no dramatic exit. Just the quiet authority of a daughter protecting her mother's legacy. The silence after Anne's departure felt different, heavier, more final. Camilla remained by the window, hands folded behind her back, saying nothing. Her legal attaché had retreated to the far corner, suddenly finding great interest in his phone. Lady Ashcroft busied herself reorganising accessories that didn't need reorganising. Merrick worked with methodical precision. He opened the climate-controlled transport case and unfolded layers of acid-free muslin, then positioned a rigid backing board inside. Every movement was practiced, deliberate. He'd done this hundreds of times with priceless artifacts, but never with something that carried this much symbolic weight. First, he folded the robe's sleeves inward, taking extreme care not to stress the gold thread embroidery. Then the hem, gently layered over itself, with the metallic trim cushioned between silk barriers. Finally, he laid the entire robe flat in the case and secured it with crossed velvet restraints, adding a digital verification tag that would track its location to the minute. As the locking mechanism clicked shut, his tablet chimed softly. Heritage class. I-transfer initiated. Custody route. Clarence House. Royal Vault. Windsor. Escort. Sergeant I. Merrick. He attached the tamper-proof seal across the case's closure, a holographic crown insignia that would trigger silent alarms at Windsor if disturbed. The moment anyone tried to open this case without proper authorization, half the Royal Protection Command would know about it. Merrick turned to address the room. There will be no public record of this transfer unless the Royal Archives choose to issue clarification. No investigation is being opened. But this particular item is now under permanent hold. Camilla nodded once, whether in acknowledgement or defiance, he couldn't tell. As he prepared to leave, his eyes fell on something he'd noticed earlier, but hadn't mentioned. A leather suitcase sitting beside the chaise, partially packed for travel. Its interior was lined with custom-fitted ridges, shaped exactly like the coronation robe's dimensions. The case had been modified specifically to transport it. A small label inside bore the discreet initials CR. He said nothing about it. Lady Ashcroft moved quietly to a nearby garment rack and selected a more modest option, a navy coat dress with silver trim. Elegant, appropriate, but carrying no historical weight whatsoever. "We'll adjust the schedule," she murmured to no one in particular. "The reserve look will work perfectly." Camilla's attaché made notes on his clipboard, already crafting the logistics of a different kind of appearance. Merrick lifted the sealed case and headed for the door. His steps were unhurried, but absolutely final. The coronation robe would never be displayed again, never be photographed for public consumption, and never be worn by anyone, ever. As he walked down the corridor toward the exit, he passed a young staffer carrying morning tea. She smiled nervously and stepped aside, probably assuming he was just another maintenance worker or equipment technician. She had no idea he was carrying the most sacred garment in British royal history, and that was exactly how it should remain. The service courtyard behind Clarence House was bathed in soft morning light, ivy-covered stone walls creating a pocket of privacy invisible to any press stationed at the front gates. Merrick stepped out into the crisp air, case in hand, flanked by no one. The Royal Collection transport vehicle was waiting exactly where it should be. Rear doors open, climate-controlled interior already activated, biometric security panel glowing green. He crossed the courtyard with steady, purposeful steps, the kind a soldier makes when carrying a flag back to hallowed ground. From somewhere behind him, a door clicked softly. He didn't turn around immediately, but he knew who was standing there. When he finally glanced back, Camilla stood alone on the rear steps. No coat against the morning chill, no aides hovering nearby, just her, arms wrapped around her waist, as if bracing against more than the cool air. Their eyes met for exactly 3 seconds. She didn't speak. He didn't pause in his mission. No nods were exchanged, no gestures of acknowledgement or forgiveness. Just two people who understood that a line had been drawn, crossed, and now redrawn in permanent ink. The van driver stepped down and opened the secured storage compartment, a custom-built chamber that could have housed crown jewels or nuclear codes with equal security. Merrick placed the case inside, ran his biometric ID across the scanner, and waited for the system to confirm chain of custody transfer. One green light, then another. The robe was officially in transit. "Sergeant Merrick," He turned to find Princess Anne, approaching from a second vehicle that had arrived so quietly he hadn't noticed it. No fanfare, no security detail, just her, wearing gloves and carrying the absolute certainty that comes from knowing you've done the right thing. "You held the line when it mattered," she said simply. Merrick considered this. She was about to turn history into a publicity stunt. With good lighting and a professional photographer, something that might have been a smile flickered across Anne's face. Some moments can only happen once. From beyond the gates, camera flashes popped as early press crews tried to capture photos of Camilla's convoy preparing for departure. They would never know what had just been prevented. As the van doors sealed and the driver returned to his position, Anne prepared to leave. Merrick remained still until the transport disappeared through the gates and merged invisibly into London traffic. Only then did he allow himself one deep breath. Not relief, not satisfaction, just the quiet knowledge that comes from protecting something larger than yourself. He hadn't prevented a crime. He hadn't saved a life. He'd saved a legacy from being borrowed, repurposed, and transformed into something it was never meant to be. And sometimes that was the most important victory of all. Should any member of the royal family be permitted to wear Queen Elizabeth II's actual coronation robe for modern appearances? Was Princess Anne justified in personally intervening to stop it? And if you found yourself in Sergeant Merrick's position, would you have opened that wardrobe, knowing the consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you believe some pieces of history are too sacred to be repurposed or rebranded, hit that like button right now to show your support for legacy over spectacle. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so you never miss stories like this. Stories that reveal what really happens behind the crown's most carefully guarded doors. Share this with someone who understands that Queen Elizabeth's legacy wasn't just a reign, but a responsibility that extends far beyond any individual who comes after. And if you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of person we create these stories for. People who believe some things are worth protecting even when no one's looking. Click the next video on your screen, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves the most important battles are often fought quietly by people who never seek credit for winning them.